italicized rather than the catch-as-catch-can situation that exists now. That's an idea. I hadn't even thought of that.
Would you like to mention something about that, Martin?
Actually, it would be a great facility to us. Statistics show that the bold-faced figures, for those of you that are first time into this deal, we've talked about this at the previous session, but statistics show that the bold-faced portion of the bold-faced italicized list is currently about the 99% level of what is actually being called at mainstream dances. Unfortunately, Jim Mayo isn't here, but he has done a survey of mainstream dances which definitely show that the frequency of counts of the bold-faced are the highest. So that if you were to do that, the people coming from the snowbird area, coming back to their home areas, would probably have 90 to 95% chance of surviving in a mainstream dance. And that's as good as the dancer that has actually danced the whole program.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah, I hate to break in again, and this is your time to talk. But I want to say this because so much is said about the frequency counts. You all understand what a frequency count is, right? They'll send out, what happened in Jim's case was a great number of callers sent him tapes of their dancers, and he counted the number of times certain figures, or all of the figures, were called during the night. And some calls were only called once, some were called no times, and progressively on up to something like maybe square through was called dozens of times during an evening. The frequency count, this in my opinion, is only good up to a certain point. I might only call one grand square a night. But that doesn't mean that those dancers don't need to be very familiar with grand square, or the Alamo-style wave, for that matter. I may only call that once a night, but they better know those calls. On the other hand, I might never call a partner hinge or a single hinge or a curlicue or a peel-off during the evening. And so you would have a legitimate count there. The frequency count is useful information, but I would watch, I would take a good hard look and not say just because it isn't called several times a night, it's not important.
All right, please speak into the microphone. Everything here will be taped, and there will be no Watergate deletions.
My name is Fred Martin from Virginia, and I've been a member of CALLERLAB since '75, and I wholeheartedly endorse it. I think it's the greatest thing that's happened as far as square dancing. You go from Florida to California to Berlin, wherever you dance, you're able to dance. You didn't used to be able to do that. And looking at these lists, over the years, some of them have not been used much, and I think as callers and leaders, we should be aware of that. And there are certain calls that are on this list now that personally I think we would be better off without. Think, for instance, number 28, dive through. Can you imagine Francis Zella diving under Marshall Flippo? Why can't we use pass to the center? It accomplishes the same thing, very much better. Okay, let's go to 42, number Zoom. I haven't heard the substitute called in a long time. Zoom is much better. We eliminate it. Let's go to number 64, curlicue. Why can't we use touch a quarter? It protects the young lady's $25 hairdo she just did. The only thing is a little bit of difference in the timing, but we as callers should be able to fix that. So let's think about, rather than leaving off some of the figures that really help the program, let's eliminate next year in Reno some that we would be better off without, such as dive through and curlicue. Let's use touch a quarter, pass to the center, and things of that nature more.
Okay, that's another subject, really. The deletions, or what should we delete. What we're really here to discuss today is the bold-face program and the italicized program on the experimental basis. Have you used it? How is it working? Will it work? Has it got any value to be done this way? We'll be getting into some other aspects of things as the morning develops, but we're not really discussing what should be deleted or could be deleted at this particular point. That's another subject altogether.
I realize that. Back in my home area, the largest dancers that we have back there, Saturday night get-together, are the halfway or the three-quarter or the graduation dancers for the students that are graduating. And the Callers Association back there that I belong to, Piedmont Callers Association, says, look, what we have is successful. It's not broke, so why fix it? But I, for one, think the list is too long, and we need to condense it to make it easier to teach people to dance.
Any other comments? Now remember, we're talking about the use of this potentially new program, the bold-faced versus the italicized.
Just one comment. If you have desire to delete, please come to our mainstream committee. We have some surprises for you.
My name is Ken Pierce from Amarillo, Texas. I am not sure if this is the appropriate time to ask it or not. This is my second CALLERLAB convention, by the way, but I'm not completely sure what we're going to vote on in the morning with reference to the lists, the italicized versus the mainstream plus combination. Is it out of order for you to explain what I'm going to have an option to vote on in the morning?
Well, be honest with you, we're at the process of determining what we're going to be voting on in the morning. That's what all these sessions are about. Information gathering. That information will be brought back to the appropriate people who will be making resolutions based upon information that we gather here this morning and in the other sessions that are geared to this general subject.
Then there will be some proposals in the morning that we can study ahead of time, or will they just be read in the morning?
They will be read in the morning because they probably will be burning the midnight oil putting those proposals together after listening to the tapes and everything else that make up these sessions.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. Were these different... I'm Roger Griffin, Greenfield, Indiana. Were these supposed to be in the packets, the things that we're talking about? There wasn't one in my packet.
You look at the right place, you'll find it.
I looked through the whole thing.
It's on the back of one you don't expect it to be on.
I'll go back and get it.
In there too. I went through it twice to find it. I had to finally get it, John.
Johnny Wedge from Eastern Massachusetts. I'm very concerned to what we're going to do tomorrow morning. It's the first time I've heard this mentioned. This is my first CALLERLAB convention, and I'm very pleased to be here. If we vote on something that's going to be a trial, an experimental, I say that we've regressed 16 years because we've gone back to, you can try it, but you don't have to try it if you don't want to, and you can try it over there. In our area, we're condensed. We have 35 square dance clubs in a 30-square mile radius. So that's probably even a small figure. Maybe 60 square dance clubs in a 35-mile radius. And we run a lot of class-level open Saturday night dances after about the 12th or 13th week of class. If I work with the bold-faced italicized list, but my fellow caller over here doesn't, then my dancers will go out and will hear swing through from the Alamo style. But I will not have taught it. And then they'll come back to me and say, why? It's on the list. The caller has every right to call it. We can't come out with something that's experimental or trial. We've either got to say, here it is, or it's not here. And I just cannot see us coming out with something that says, if you want it, do it. If you don't want it, don't do it.
What I read into your comment, John, is that when we look at an italicized portion of the list that says, quote, teach it whenever you want to teach it, later and so forth, you're saying that concept can create problems. You will teach, say, the bold-faced list, get through in 20 weeks, 25 weeks, but another guy goes ahead and teaches a bunch of the italicized calls as well at the same time, and your people run into the situation where they might hear one of these calls. That is one of the problems that we are discussing here today. Exactly what you're saying. So what we're saying is, how do you handle that bold-faced, italicized list? Is it the right way to go? Should they all be bold-faced and delete those that are unnecessarily italicized or italicized calls that are unnecessary to the program? That's the kind of information we want to hear from you. Will this work? Will it won't work? If it won't work, why? Et cetera and so forth.
Absolutely.
Well, I think what you're saying is a problem of two things going at the same time in an area where you have to have your new dancer hoedowns, right? I think when the press release went out, they said if this is something that would be desirable for you in your area. Obviously, it wouldn't be. It would be like saying, if your program has a need for a quarterly selection movement, use it. If it doesn't, don't use it. If you have an experimental workshop, use these calls. If you don't use them. At this point, they're not saying this is black and white. I think when it comes down to it, if they decide the 25-week program is a good thing and it's something that everybody should have, I think everybody will be using it at that time. At that time, it won't be optional any longer. They say this is what CALLERLAB recommends. Up to that point, we're going to have to get some feedback from some experienced callers like yourselves that have tried the program to find out if it's going to work. I don't think you'd want to come to a convention and have a bunch of guys sit down and say, well, I think this is good, I think this is good, and make up a list. Say, okay, everybody try this now, and throw the other one away. I think that would be a worse situation than what you're talking about right now.
John, stay there for a minute. How many lessons do you teach in your beginner class?
36.
36 lessons. Are you able to teach the entire program, everything that's on that mainstream program, all 68 and everything else in between?
Absolutely not.
You cannot. So some things are being either not taught at all or being pushed off to a later time when it might be appropriate.
Well, I could say that I have never, ever taught, in 25 years of calling, a left square through. I've called many of them, but I've never taught one.
Mm-hmm.
I just said, now with your left hand, begin a square through. And I've never taught a half sachet. I've never called one either. Oh, yeah, maybe 4 years ago, but not in the past 15 years. And I'm not talking about those figures, but on that italicized list, there are figures that, and I go along with what Darrell said, that even though the survey showed they weren't used very often, they're very important figures. I won't say that the Alamo style is important. I think if we vote as members to drop it, fine, I just won't call any more Alamo styles. I can live without it. I can't live without wheel around. You see, my problem is, unlike a lot of because I'm not perfect and I make mistakes, and I need wheel around to get myself out of that error.
Next, gentleman.
No. I'm Red Hennon again from Michigan. Last year at this convention, we had a big, I think, the ad hoc committee where we formulated all the input from all the committees in order to create this 25-week list. And one of the things we formulated also was italicized calls off the mainstream list.
That's the one we're referring to here. We're not concerned about the 25-week experimental program with the plus calls.
My question is that committee from last year still in existence, or was that just a temporary committee formed in order to create the list?
The one for the bold-faced italicized is part of the mainstream program. Mainstream committee. It's ongoing.
Yes.
The one that created the 25-week experimental program that included the 6 or 8 or 10 plus calls, that was an ad hoc committee and is
okay. Is there another committee like that to try to formulate all of what we're trying to accomplish?
Well, they're over there discussing one side of the fence. We're talking about the other side of the fence, the Senate bill and the House bill, if you will.
But we don't have a president to give us a veto on that. You know, they're doing their thing, we're doing ours, all right?
No, we're information gathering.
Okay.
And it's going to be going back to proper committees, mainly the mainstream committee. What you're saying, is there a working ad hoc committee to decipher the information they get over there?
When he has his meeting this afternoon, is he going to know what went on in the other room? That's my question. Are we going to get input on that?
Not being in there, I have no direct information.
The only thing is, we're going one way, and that room over there, I'm sure, is going another. Is there a combined way we should be going? That's my only question, and that's what they did last year with their ad hoc committee.
Well, I see what you're saying in the fact that we want to try to come out of here with one goal in mind and one road to get to that end result rather than two possibilities. I think that question is unanswered by us at this point because we don't have the answer.
We won't have that input for the meeting this afternoon, in other words.
It's going to be used somewhere down the line. I only know what I'm responsible for and charged with here. Okay. Where that information is going, to be honest with you, I don't think anybody at this table knows. Do you?
I'm interested in what you feel is a correlation between that
what they're doing there affects the mainstream program the same way what he's doing affects their program.
It does not. This is the mainstream program. What they have over there is a program that they're trying to settle on that will handle the areas of the country that have a mainstream/plus dance level. There are areas of the country that don't have the problem with having the no plus level in order to dance in their area. And that's what we're looking at here, is a way to get entry-level dancers into the mainstream program. We're really not looking at a way to try to bring the two together at this point. Okay? We have a problem that's been presented to us in trying to figure out a way to shorten the time it takes to teach new dancers to dance in mainstream, not mainstream/plus. And that's what we're doing in this room. Over there they have a problem, how to get new dancers into mainstream, soft plus, whatever. And that's being tackled over there. The idea of bringing two of them together may be desirable someday, but at this point it's not part of the work that's going on here.
Okay.
Art Harvey, Anaheim, California. Why not? Aren't we after a 25-week program to enable us to get dancers at a club-level dance program, regardless of the name? Maybe we ought to forget mainstream plus and mainstream and get back to a square dancing program, which we can teach in 25 weeks and get people dancing.
What you're really saying is that you're in favor of... Stay there for a minute. I want to hear more what you have to say. That, in essence, we should, quote, throw out the present mainstream program and plus programs and come up with a program.
Yes.
Called square dancing.
Yes.
Or something of its kind. And that it includes, quote, the popular of each. Now, that's what those folks next door are discussing. Right now. That's what they're doing. And... let me mention to you this, whether it was understood or misunderstood, the press releases that went out that indicated that experimental program was shooting at the people who are interested in the concept that you are talking about. The letters that came back and were forwarded to us were 90% plus in favor of not amalgamating at this point in time. The Washington area people came up with it last year, and right now the thing is leave it alone. It's not broken. Don't fix it. We're happy the way we are. Don't change anything. And yet we're all looking at the fact that it's been proven out by all the other sessions we've had here that the majority of the callers who teach beginner classes do not teach everything on the mainstream list. So in essence, they've reduced from 42 lessons that would be necessary to teach that full list to 25, and something's got to give. And the majority of the folks agreed that the calls that are pushed aside are the italicized ones. Now, what you're talking about is an altogether other concept, that we would start from scratch, give us the best of mainstream and the most popular of plus, and eliminate the other two programs. At this point in time, we're not really discussing that here. That's not our charge. Many people feel exactly like you do, that that's the way we ought to go. And just as many feel, hey, let's take what we've got and adjust it somewhat and leave it alone. We've already got some working programs. Let's don't tear everything up again. So there are these viewpoints on both sides. But at this session, again, I reiterate, we're really only looking at how the bold-faced, italicized program can work or be revised or be changed or whatever. So we're not trying to, to turn off your idea. We just have to narrow down what we've been charged with.
I understand that, Jack. I'm just presenting the view of the dance organizations in California.
It's interesting.
I'd kind of like to respond to you, not you personally, but the dance organizations of California, by saying that this has been done at one time. We already did this once, and they came up with a program and called it mainstream. It was, at that time, considered to be the national dance level, and everybody was teaching that dance level, and for some reason, and very good reasons in some cases, certain areas of the country decided that a little more was better. They danced a little more frequently as the main reason. And so they started adding some calls from the plus level, and they decided that was their dance level. Well, that may work very, very fine for your area, but I'm kind of curious to find out why so many callers would think that where that type of an idea didn't work the first time, it would work this time. You know, if you couldn't take the list as it was, mainstream, and go ahead and teach it, and make a program out of it, a national level program, and call it without, you know, adding from up above and making the list larger on your own, why it would work a second time around. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Oh.
I think part of the problem, Darrell, is the fact that we kept adding, we never subtracted anything.
Oh, now we got down to it. The freeze is the problem,
yes.
Right?
Okay.
My name is Howard Gilmore. I'm from Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, we do have very active mainstream square dance programs. 80% of our clubs are mainstream clubs. The other 20% are divided between plus and advanced, very little challenge dancing clubs in Wisconsin. The callers' organizations that we've discussed this at this italicized print, most of them have not had enough experience with it to know whether it's helpful or not, but none of them have any of the 5 organizations have any objection to this italicized idea and it being tried, but we feel it would take a while to find out if it is very helpful. And we must confess that probably nobody in Wisconsin teaches everything on the mainstream list, and at least from all different positions. But we do have we would like to keep a mainstream program. We'd hope this organization will allow us to keep a mainstream program. Now, I was also requested by the gentleman from California mentioned the dancer organization. I got a telephone call from the president of the Wisconsin Square Dancers Association asking me to plead with somebody, please do not change the mainstream list. Please leave us alone.
Next down. Terry Mosier, Fremont, California. In our area, we have an abundance of plus-level clubs. Our main program is to get through the newer dancers class at a certain given time each year and produce them into the club as new members. My concern about any change in the list until we can really change the list completely is with an abundance of clubs in the area and callers, we have different situations of different callers teaching different moves. At hoedowns, it's been tried this year in our area, some teaching one list, some staying with the standard CALLERLAB list. At certain hoedowns where people are supposed to go out and have fun and dance and enjoy themselves, you end up with a floor that is going completely down, and if you're a responsible caller, you'll go down, pick up your floor, and bring it back up and try to keep your people dancing all night. Our problem is then you have people walking up between tips saying, I don't know half the stuff you're calling. And whether it's myself or some other caller. If we're going to make a change, which I agree we need a change, because what we've been doing hasn't worked. But if we're going to make a change, let's make it all at one time so that everybody does it, is my main concern.
Well taken. Next gentleman. John?
Don Littlefield from Minnesota. We in Minnesota are kind of proud, I think, of our mainstream program that we have there. And I would surely hate to see anything happen to that. First of all, I am a CALLERLAB member, and I've been for quite some time, and I'm going to conform to what the vote is here tomorrow. One way or the other, whether I like it or not, I'm going to do it. I think as far as the bull as far as the bold-faced and the italicized program. Whenever you have the italicized program, I think, you're going to have different people doing different things with that. If you're going to have a program, I would like to see it listed right down the sheet. What should be taught, what should be called, rather than the italicized, because you're going to have somebody over here doing something, you're going to have somebody over there doing something else, somebody in the middle going to be doing something else. And that leads to nothing but confusion. And we've been confused and frustrated enough. Let's get it squared away.
At our last session, little food for thought, because time gets away and starts running away from us, we ended up with 3 concepts of handling a list of calls that need to be taught in the 25-week period. Ignore what they were, what they are. Okay? The 3 concepts were: 1, to have a list that listed a call. For example, circulate. And you on your own determined whether your people needed to do couple circulate, all 8 circulate, single file circulate, any one, all, or none. Well, or one, you know. Another concept was to specifically spell out which circulate. Circulate, you should teach all 8 circulate, you should teach single file circulate, etc. Each individual one spelled out in writing in the bold-faced concept. The third one was to italicize and say, as it is now, pick it up when you want to pick it up or when you can. The voting at that point in time was very much in favor, strongly, of the fact that callers, like Don Littlefield just said, want to know exactly what should be taught and put it on the list, with one exception. The exception was they did not want for us to specify left swing through and swing through. They said, just put swing through down. Let us in our area determine whether we need the swing through or the left swing through as well as the swing through. And it was overwhelming. Just give us the basic call name. Let us go to the degree of depth we want to and our area wants to. Let's go on with other discussion.
I'm Bill Obert from Seguin, Texas. And I've been calling for about 8 years and teaching also. And I've been teaching mainstream and plus as the club got to where the students got to where they could handle it later on. I always taught my mainstream with the boldface, and then after I'd finished that, dropped back to pick up what was in the italicized, which is the way I thought it was supposed to be taught. But I have had dancers that, I don't know if any of you have run across them or not, but I've had dancers talk to me that say, oh, I used to be in square dancing, and it was a lot of fun. But then they started pushing a new call at me every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, something else to learn, instead of letting me dance and have a good time. So I don't know what we have to do. I think we should probably cut it down, but I don't know how we're going to satisfy everybody in doing it. Thank you.
Roger Griffin, Greenfield, Indiana. I keep hearing these gentlemen, and I hope that it's true, but they say their area has mainstream dances. I think it's fabulous. But I wonder how many of them teach and call at every dance the divide, the half sachet instead of roll a half sachet. I'm wondering, are we being true to ourselves? I asked myself this a long time ago. I was lying to myself when I thought I was calling a real mainstream dance. I don't know, it may be out of place, but would it be to where we could vote just to see, and all callers, please be honest, do you teach this while you're teaching? Do you call it at a dance? Maybe I'm out of way. If I am, just tell me and I'll sit down. But I keep hearing everybody say we've got a strong mainstream go. Strong mainstream go. And I hope for their sake that it is, because in our area, we've got callers that will teach in 10 weeks the mainstream list and then send them out. This is what scares me, folks.
I think one of the surveys has kind of proven out the fact that the majority of the calls that are italicized are either very seldomly used on a regular basis or not used at all. And that in actuality, the bold-face program is really what we're calling and really what we're teaching. And several gentlemen have said, well, if we're not using them, we're not teaching them, well, why don't we just get them out of the way and get rid of them and do what and put on the list what we're really doing, not just put a bunch of stuff on the list for having it there. And while you all know that a lot of this can't happen till next year, a lot of it can happen this year. If you attend the mainstream committee meeting this afternoon with Martin, there are going to be some proposals there made today about opening up this freeze and taking some immediate action at this convention and then finalizing it next year in Reno. But we need to know where you want us to go. See, you're the keys. You're the key. If we are honest with what we're doing, it'll all resolve itself. It'll all resolve itself. Gentlemen?
Eddie Mayo, Massachusetts. First off, I think this list that's been put together of the mainstream program, and you really look at the boldface and the italicized pieces of it, I think the boldface are reality of what's being taught and what's being called, and we're not facing the facts. The facts are here, guys. Let's do it. Amen.
I just got one comment. Steve Billings from Florida. John Jones made a good point yesterday when he said that, you know, the way you get rid of a move, if you don't want it, is don't call it. And I think we've basically gotten rid of a lot of the moves that are italicized already. How many of us really call split the ring? How many of us really call divide? How many of us call half of the moves at least or less that are italicized to begin with, those that run mainstream programs? I was over this morning and I attended the Mainstream Plus experimental program. And I think we got a number of problems. I've called, before I came to Florida, I called 4 years in Spain, and I called around Europe. And in Europe, they've got a very, very, very strong mainstream program. And as a result of that, that's one area. We have areas around the country I've heard saying they've got primarily plus programs and so forth and so on. Down in Florida, I found out, southern Florida, we are basically a pyramid without a base. We don't have a mainstream program. We have a very little plus program and a lot of advanced program. Now, I see another problem in the fact that, you know, we're talking about entry levels. Every area of the country has an entry level that's different. Some of us have mainstream entry levels, some of us have plus entry levels, but we all have the same problem, and that is keeping dancers without overtraining them. We're trying to get down to where we can teach a program, whether it be mainstream plus, or whatever, in 25 weeks or so. I guess that's the basic target area. And as a result of that, we're also trying to get standardization. Now, I made this comment over in the other room, and the reason I want to make it here is because it's a possible suggestion as a solution. I'm not saying it's a solution. I'm saying it's something to think about. Because next year we're going to be able to, and we really need to, make some kind of changes. Right now we've got community programs, suggestions, we've got boldface suggestions, we've got mainstream plus suggestions, we've got a lot of different experimental suggestions, but we have to come up with some kind of standardization. That, I think, is the primary thing, standardizing and shortening. And in order to do that, I would like to suggest some sort of a modularization. That is, obviously we're going to have to start when we teach with circle left, circle right. But once we get up about halfway through, or what we used to be called maybe basics, we don't necessarily have to continue then on with the list as it currently is, whether it's italicized or otherwise. We can throw in, depending on the area, and we as callers and as our dancers can tell us what they need to know to dance in their area. So we can throw in things like maybe some of the plus moves at that point in time. Then come back, if need to, and pick up other mainstream calls. Or we don't, in other words, what I'm saying is that we don't have to stick strictly with lists. Dancers don't have to know when the lists are done or not. Dancers don't have to know that they're a mainstream dancer. Dancers don't have to know that they're a plus dancer. Dancers have to know only that they can dance and have fun in their area. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. You may be interested in knowing that next door, the gentleman who spoke first wanted to know, let's get one avenue going. We may be approaching that at this point. And Darrell just came in and had an interesting viewpoint that's happening on the other side, and I've asked him to tell you a little bit about it.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Kip Garvey just made a comment for people to think about in the next room, and I said, well, this pertains to the people next door, and we really should be talking together about this thing. You're in here concerned with a 25-week teach program for mainstream, period, and some italicized calls on that list. We're over there with the really an entry program for people that dance in primarily plus levels, which is nearly the same list that you have, with the addition of about 8 plus calls. And most of us are in agreement that it would be so much better, or a lot of us have discussed and feel like we're in agreement, it would be so much better if we had one class program, period, that could be taught in 25 weeks. And each one of us has things that we like in our area, or I do, and that kind of thing. And the only way we're going to arrive at that is if some of us give a little and some of us take a little situation. And Kip has come up with an idea that we wanted you to think about before this meeting was over, and that was take your list, and that is the 25-week teach mainstream bold-faced and italicized list. Bold-faced, period. Yes, okay. That's the list you're working with, though. You have some italicized, some bold-faced. Okay. We want to take your list of mainstream bold-faced only. There are 3 calls that you have on there that we do not have on the plus list, and those are Cloverleaf, Cross Trail Through, and one other one. Leave those on your list. That's fine. We'd like to add, at the very maximum, 2 plus calls, whatever that vote might be to put on there. And we'd like to call that a 25-week teaching program called for everybody, and that would be mainstream. All of your italicized calls and all of the other plus calls would be put on one much larger list called plus. Everybody would teach mainstream beginner lessons, 25 weeks. If and or when people wanted to go to plus, I don't know the number, but they'd have a much larger number, a lot more to teach. Now, I've heard various proposals of this. Some people said we should be in 25-week modules, 25 weeks for mainstream, 25 weeks for plus, 25 weeks for the next, and so on. A lot of people said that we need to make the jump from mainstream to plus a lot larger so people won't go so fast. I really think this is a good idea, and I just came in to ask you to think about it and see if you would like to express your opinion on it. And if the chairman of the 2 groups can get together by the end of the week, we might come up with something. Now, these 2 committees that have worked on these 2 lists have worked very, very hard for nearly a year. And quite honest, we haven't had time to use the list and see exactly how they're going to work. But they have worked for nearly a year, and the lists are so close right now, it would not take that much longer to get them down to what we're talking about. A 25-week teaching lesson, mainstream, everybody. That would include only 2 plus calls, which we're adding. It would include 3 calls, which you're adding more or less, let's say, to our list, if you want to put it that way. And then everything else that is not on your bold-face list and everything that's on the plus list would all be called plus. But I don't want to come in before I go back in there and tell them.
Darrell, what you're really saying was a proposal that was made last year. And we were blown out of the saddle by the Baltimore area group, which were heavy in numbers, Washington folks, who wanted to eliminate the 2 plateau program, mainstream and plus, and amalgamate just into one, and not have either, just one group called mainstream. And they blew that concept that you're talking about right out of the saddle. And now we're coming back towards that idea again. And I would like to ask if anybody would like to comment upon what Darrell has just brought over.
I have a question. these italicized one would be optional according to areas and according to clubs. You might use them or you might not.
According to the proposal that Darrell just brought over, you would take the boldface program, plus or minus, minor changes, and add to that one or two, or was it two? No more than two of the present plus program, probably the ones that most mainstream dancers know anyway. And all italicized calls from the present list in your hand would then be shifted up a notch into what is now the plus program to enlarge the plus program for two reasons. One, it would change the amount of time that it takes to jump from mainstream to plus, increase it sufficiently that they won't jump in over a summer workshop and tend to keep more people at mainstream.
I have another question, Jack. Would this require a change in bylaws and all that to be had now?
I don't think so.
Okay. Listen, I don't think so, but as most of you know, the mainstream list is frozen until next year. Correct? Okay, I understand you're talking about changing that. Anyway, this would give us the program that we've worked on for a year in committees trying to come up with this list as an experimental thing only. It would give us this program which you can, everybody, plus clubs, mainstream clubs, what have you, can start teaching in the fall and have completed before we come to a convention next year when, if you do not change it, the mainstream list can be unfrozen. The point being, everybody recognizes this, we can't bring beginners in and teach them how to square dance and them have anywhere to go in the amount of time that we're allowed right now. That's the point, is to get to 25 weeks that everybody is teaching. That's your entry level, that's your entry classes. People that put on festivals can have a big room at that level, and the people will have a place to go dance. Now, some of you that have plus clubs right now, and only plus clubs, fine, call what you're calling. We're talking about the same figures. You're not changing the figure. We're not changing your dance. But if you have a club, this gives you a way to bring people into a class. You can bring people into class. However, of course, now they've got to have a place to dance when they get out of class. So some of the people in the strictly plus club will have a longer further go if they want to go that far. But the point is to get in class for 25 weeks and everybody doing the same class everywhere. Festivals, special dances can have a dance at that level when the people get out of class in 25 weeks. You can have clubs at that level, be fine.
I think basically, this is Bob Johnston, Anaheim, California. Basically, that's true at the present time. We have a mainstream list, we have a plus list, and I think the point that you made just a minute ago is the thing that that all of this hinges on. The separation between mainstream and plus has just never been great enough. When we had plus one and plus two, the natural reaction from the super achievers, the hot dogs, and all these people that come out of classes is, I finished the 68 basics, what do I do next? They never go to a club, even if there was a mainstream club, of which I'm not aware of in our areas anyway. But I think the big thing is they rush on through. There was only 13 more basics, and there was only 14 more to go into plus two. So these guys rush right through. A lot of them, they're having fun in class. They have a competent instructor, and in many instances they go out to dances where they dance to various callers, and they say, hey, I like my teacher better, so I'll go back to class. And I think the thing we really need is just what you say. We need a mainstream, which we have. We need a plus, which we have. The only thing that I would suggest is go back and cut out the garbage, the duplications that we have in our mainstream program that people say, why do you do two ways to do a California twirl, a partner trade, all that stuff? And instead of adding plus to a mainstream list, why not cut it down and make the mainstream number of basics commensurate with the amount that you have on a plus list? This may stop some of that. You know, if you go into advanced, there's a much greater differentiation there. Of course, the figures are harder too. But I say take the two lists. I have no fault with the mainstream and plus lists as they are, except that in our area and many areas, mainstream dancers cannot dance until they get through a plus list there. So I'd say work on the other end of it. Cut down all this stuff that's duplications. We can reduce the number of basics on that.
Your idea is a good idea, but why put a couple pluses in there? Why not just take the mainstream and let it go that way? Take those others, move them to plus if you want to. and let the callers learn that the dancers ought to have a chance to dance at mainstream before they try to drag them into plus too soon. I mean, in Texas, or actually in the San Antonio area, we do not really have that problem too much. We have a dance, it is listed as a plus dance if it's a plus dance. If it's a mainstream dance, it will be listed as a mainstream dance with announced pluses. And the callers that call, I don't care where they're from, they're asked to call it. I won't say they all stick to it, but they're asked to call it that way.
The point of the entire thing was to get the number of lessons down. I agree, you have a mainstream program, and that's good, and I have no problem with using it. But I don't feel that I and most of us can teach mainstream so that we have very, very competent mainstream dancers in 25 weeks. The point was to get the teaching time down. The only reason for adding a couple plus calls was to make the other people happy. Just, understand what I'm saying? A little bit of concession there, give a little, take a little. And we brought it down from 8 to 2. We're talking about it, if we were to do this type of thing, we're talking about accepting 3 calls off the mainstream, which we don't have on our plus combined list, and adding 2 plus calls.
Well, didn't CALLERLAB recommend that we dance dancers for at least a year at mainstream before we bring them into plus? If all callers would practice that, we wouldn't have this problem.
They did, but the problem exists, Bill. I don't think you'll find anybody that's been more vocal in their support of the mainstream program than myself. And I really haven't had enough time. Yes, both Darrells. I haven't had enough time to really look at this proposal. But up front, the up front look of it, if they're saying that we get to continue to call what we call most anyway, which is what it looks like to me at this point, and add 2 calls from the plus, retain what we already have, add 2 calls from the plus, and they'll make all the other changes over there to accommodate their group. That doesn't sound like too bad a concession to me up front. It sounds good. It's not the kind of a thing that I don't think that I could take back to my people back home in the Northwest, which is 98-99% mainstream. I'm going to have to look at it closer. I just think maybe it's well worth a real close look at.
Let me leave you this one thought. Y'all discuss it how you like it. I'm going back over there, but the point being is trying our best to get everybody together. That's the thing. One teaching list, 25 weeks, everybody all over the world, one list, call it mainstream. You're giving up some calls. We're adding some to the plus list to make it harder to go into the plus program. And we're suggesting that we perhaps try to experiment with this next year, and when the mainstream list can be changed next year, if we want to change it, we can change it. But the whole point is not for your area in San Antonio and not for mine in Panama City, Florida, but for square dancing in general. Get everybody together, one teaching lesson, 25 weeks, everybody everywhere does the same thing. And before I leave, I want you to remember one thing. I'm the Darrell that's good looking with a lot of hair.
Excuse me. I would like to step ahead. Not a lot of hair. Would you step to the microphone, please? You're being taped, Chairman. Hey, excuse me, fellas. Norm Cross. I was over there, Dale, and wasn't the indication, unless I missed it, that they would like to put in 2 this year with the full intent to come back with 2 more next year?
Well, that's a horse of another color. I didn't understand it as add 2 every year, but possibly.
I thought that's what they were leading to, was to add 2 now and then,
to this list?
Yeah, to this list, like you indicated.
Okay.
But I think the belief was
possibly
that
2 per year.
They was going to add, come back next year and maybe put another one on and
evolve it in a period of 5 years.
Yeah.
I made the proposal
Okay.
there, Dewey, and I just suggested Okay.
Kenny Paris, Laurel, Maryland. I made the proposal over there, and I just suggested that they might choose the 2 from, but the leader of the discussion kind of went with it like, oh, well, let's add 2 every year. But I was only simply saying, why don't we take like track 2 and extend, put them on put them on the mainstream list this year, and forget it. And then maybe next year, hey, if it worked out all right and it was accepted well, and we've deleted some of our calls, maybe we could, trying to get the two programs together. That was what was done. And by the way, they've totally forgotten. They're not even talking about it anymore over there.
Okay, let's go back to where we were. Thank you. Next gentleman. Thank you, Darrell, for at least bringing that to our attention.
Again, this sounds like a good idea, but it's up to the callers to make it work. I'm opposed to adding 2 every year.
I am too.
But really, if the callers would learn to let the dancers dance and not try to bring them into plus and mainstream too soon to make those extra bucks, which a lot of them do, I think we'd be a lot better off. Thank you.
Tom Sumner from Maryland. I was on the other side also, and there is about a half and half over there. If we entertain this idea of only adding 2 plus calls and keeping the boldface program for a year, I know that in my area, this is exactly what the people in our association were hoping for. We voted for it. We've discussed it at very long length. We're hoping that one thing comes out of this convention for us to test this year, not 2, just 1. And we're hoping that the test holds, and next year we get rid of all the deadwood we don't need, and eventually maybe we'll come down to one thing, square dancing again. That's what we're hoping for. I think this is a good step. We need to mix somehow. We can't keep plus over here and mainstream advocates over here. We have to come together. I think that the 2 calls accepted from the plus list and with the bold things as a thing that we all teach this year could possibly be the one thing that would bring us together and eventually have one thing, square dancing again. And next year, the things that we don't need, we take off. We pare the list down. We don't want to make it, let's face it, we have to think of, we're saying the callers do everything. The dancers have an awful lot to do with this. Their desires. They will do, if there's no big plus thing from the go-to, they're not going to go to it. It's only there because it's there. We have an excellent barrier, if you want a barrier, it's called advanced. It's a very excellent barrier. If we get back and accept this compromise of only 2 calls at our bow list and try to go forward with it, we may have our answer. I think we do have it. I think it could be the answer. And we can eliminate, we know if we have all this stuff we don't dance, I know in our area, our plus groups basically maybe dance 8 calls at the most. Maybe 10 if you're real lucky. Maybe 2 clubs out of the whole area dance 3/4 of the plus list. And only 1 club that I know of really dances all of them. So let's put this compromise forward. Let's try this one test for a year of having just the boldface and 2 plus calls. And I'd like to make a motion toward that.
Not necessary. Okay. This is an information gathering thing. Okay. We just want to make you aware that there was a time before CALLERLAB and the mushroom of calls where we had a 3-plateau system. The new graduate joined a program which was basically called fun level dancing. The experienced club dancer was, quote, an intermediate or club dancer. And then there was the higher plateaus, which were all grouped into one big thing called high-level dancing. Now, why do we get away from that program? What made us go to all these other plateaus? The differences at that time were very simple. High-level dancing wasn't identified. There was no list there. There were people who were getting tired every time the fun-level dancer got out of class and had danced a few months and wanted to join, quote, the club where everybody danced. The club program plateau had to be reduced in quality, in positioning, in total number of vocabulary calls to accommodate the new dancer. So the first year this was fine for the second-year dancer. The third year it was fine. But we were losing dancers out of our club or intermediate program because after 3, 4, 5 years of every 6 months the club went back to a beginner level, they quit dancing. And it was the fact that so many were leaving dancing because they were bored that led to the establishment of a plus program to accommodate those dancers who had 3, 4, 5 years experience. No thought was given to the fact that when we created those programs, that dancers were going to be forced right out of beginner class before they could have their feet wet and even do a square through and keep it straight, that they were going to have to learn to relay the deucey. That's our fault. That's not their fault. Now, we can go back to that program, which is what the Washington area people are talking about. And maybe that's the right thing to do. And that's what we're talking about here. What is the right thing for us to do today? To bring dancers back into the, quote, classroom, into keeping them into the clubs, and to take the pressure off those people and let them dance and have fun.
Ken Pierce from Amarillo, Texas again. In our area, there are very few clubs that teach lessons on a separate night. Most instances, we teach from 7 to 8:30, then the club comes in and dances from 8:30 until 10:30 or whatever time they get tired and go home. I personally taught my class this last year with the proposed mainstream and plus combination. I liked it, but I did not have enough time in the number of weeks that the club really gives me to teach it. And I taught longer than anybody else in our area. I was the last guy to graduate, and my club kept saying, when are our dancers going to get through too? I think this new proposal would give me more opportunity to teach the moves that I teach well, and I think I would have a better chance of retaining all of the graduates, or more of the graduates. I think I like it.
Don, and then we're going to about wrap it up. It's about break time, but you've given, and after Don speaks, you've given all the involved persons that are going to have to take this information back. You've given them a lot of ammunition this morning, gang. A lot of good thoughts coming out of this bunch.
Yeah, Don Littlefield from Minnesota again. Really, I feel like Darrell. I really haven't had a chance to digest that new proposal. It don't seem too bad. I think I could probably live with it. The thing that does bother me, guys, and I guess, and girls, I guess I'm as guilty as anybody. We do things. We listen to people come up here and say that their new people are pushed and pulled over into the plus area, which is probably true, and I'm sure that a lot of callers are doing that. There are a lot of dancers, their friends. These new people that are learning to dance, their friends are encouraging them also to come over and dance the plus. And I think, personally, that we have created our bucket of worms that we're in right now.
By having a two program.
Not only that, but by everybody going their own direction, and people in the center trying to keep the mainstream, the people on the sides or wherever they are out there doing plus. I know we've got people in our area, callers in our area, that are out there advocating, you got to come and dance plus with me. And they're taking our mainstream people. That is the only place they can get them from. But we are going to have to get back to leadership. And instead of talking out of both sides of our mouth at the same time, try to do what we tell people we're going to do. We go to a callers meeting, and everybody is in agreement. You leave that callers meeting, and everybody's going their own different direction. Absolutely. It is obvious as the nose on your face. So we got to get back, I think, and start advocating a little bit of leadership.
Thanks, Don. Straw vote, and we're going out the door. How many of you feel in concept that to accept the bold face program plus no more than 2 of the popular plus calls and take the italicized calls from mainstream and push them to plus would present for all of us an acceptable alternative to where we are today. If you agree with that, put your hands up. I'm just straw voting. I don't know what will happen down the road. That has to be crossed. That bridge has to be crossed. I'm talking about two at this point in time. If that was to be the resolution, how many would be in favor of it at this